But I'll tell you one thing that I'm looking for, and it's no one's really talking about it, but I'm curious for cryptocurrencies, and this could be a big bullish catalyst, is that
Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies fell along with the stock market on Monday, extending recent losses ahead of what could be a volatile trading week. Meanwhile, a massive Ethereum 2.0 upgrade is on the horizon. The ETH merger will undoubtedly increase volatility in the cryptocurrency markets. With that said, is it worthwhile to buy more Bitcoin or Ethereum as we fall pre-merge? Gareth has been a pro trader for more than 20 years. He devoted his early professional years to the study of technical charts. He developed his trading strategies using his own money, including the confirmation signal, three-tail theory, river theory, cycle analysis, and a keen sense of market mood and timing. Stay tuned until the end of the video and listen carefully to what Gareth Soloway has to teach us. Make a comment, subscribe, and like the video. See you soon.
we've seen that pull back now. We've two pretty big sharp down days, Friday and today. And now the question is, again, where do we go? So I think for Bitcoin itself, Bitcoin is kind of trying to figure that out as well. And in fact, we can go to the Bitcoin chart here. Let me bring that up so we can take a look. But basically, we broke down below this channel. So this was a bearish kind of channel, perfectly parallel lower line and upper line. And you can see on Friday when we had the big market sell-off, it did break. So that's a little bit of a concern. It's not the end all be all though, because you're still holding above the 2017 highs. So this is going to be a big test now for Bitcoin. Does Bitcoin come down? Does it tag it and bounce? Or do we start to break lower? And again, for that, you have to look at the DXY, the dollar. I think the dollar is hugely important here. The dollar has been screaming to the upside. I do have it penciled in that we have a nice double top here, so I expect a pullback in the dollar, and that may save Bitcoin in the near term. Yeah, so I mean, you're literally where we were on the dollar on June 13th or so, June 14th. And so that would be a double top. And then I like to go to my weekly chart and zoom out a little bit. And I still think that for the dollar to only have pulled back as much as it did and then retest and break out, it doesn't seem likely because these two trend lines are so powerful. So if anything, I'm looking at this as more of a double top, at least in the near term, that should push the dollar back down. Now, you might say, well, what's the catalyst for the dollar to pull back? Well, what about the jobs number coming not this Friday, I believe, but next Friday? I think that's going to be a big one because we know the jobs number is a lagging indicator, or at least a lagging indicator, right? So we know that some of the economic data is already kind of weakening, but the jobs data has been so strong that everyone's saying, oh, well, the Fed has to keep tightening because they can with the jobs data. If we look at the natural gas chart, there's this from early 20 or late 2021, look at this channel and how every time we hit the upper line, it sells off. And look at this. I mean, this was an epic sell-off, but look at how close we are to hitting that again. In fact, that's, for me, I'm going to look to short that on natural gas. I will be pulling the trigger on a short on natural gas, obviously proper allocation in my portfolio. But that to me is a no-brainer that it should be running into resistance here. And just to show you the power of these channels, which are parallel lines that charts seem to stick in between, take a look at the US oil chart from a while back. And I want to just get rid of some of these extra lines so you guys can really zone in on this. But this is remarkable, right? So if we go to your weekly chart, actually, let's go to the monthly chart. Look at the parallel and how it marked the top on oil. If you remember, Paul, when we were at 130, everyone was calling for $150, $200 a barrel. And what did it do? It tagged the upper end, which was perfectly parallel to these lows here, and oil collapsed back down. So I use these in my trading in every day, and it is amazingly powerful to utilize it and to be able to call tops and bottoms. Yeah, so Ethereum is one of the trickier charts for me to analyze, mainly because of the curveball of the merge and how that affects price. I'm a true believer that the reason Ethereum has rallied, I mean, if you look at the rally, it was up over 100% off of the lows. My guess is a chunk of that gain was due to the excitement of the merge. My fear is that it's going to be a sell the news event. It's going to happen. Yes, it's a good thing for Ethereum, but I don't necessarily know if it's a short-term continued catalyst. So my guess is I think you could get some bounces here, but I wouldn't be surprised if you have to go at least retest 1250 down here, which would be major support before it has a chance to kind of withstand the selling pressure that the U.S. markets are likely to exude. So I'm in that camp where I still think there's a little bit more downside. I still think Bitcoin has further downside, and therefore by default probably Ethereum. The question for me is, has Ethereum put in its longer term low already? Which again, I'm a little bit murky on. This was trading near 5,000. It went to 875 or so before this bounce back. Usually you'll get a check back. So my line in the sand for me would be this little pivot right down here. You can see it's a two kind of pivot top right there and right there. And that would be your spot where if you flushed into it around 1260, 1250, that would be where a short-term long could be initiated for a pretty significant bounce back up. And I think that's going to be the kicker here, where if you see another 10, 20, 30% downside on the NASDAQ, maybe 20% on the S&P, then by default, it will drag down cryptocurrencies. But I'll tell you one thing that I'm looking for, and no one's really talking about it, but I'm curious for cryptocurrencies, and this could be a big bullish catalyst, is that do we get the Gary Genslers, the SEC, do we get some form of clarity on what kind of restrictions or what kind of rules Ethereum and the altcoins are going to have as securities? And I know everyone's like, oh my goodness, this is going to be horrible for them. But interestingly enough, clarity is what the market craves. And when you get clarity, even if it's bad initially, I believe the market will actually embrace it after an initial sell-off. So you might see it panic, right? You might see that big dip down. It's almost worth kind of throwing out some orders at ridiculously low levels, because if we get that, it sells hard, and then all of a sudden people say, wait a minute, now we know what this means. We know it. So now we can value these things. And I think, again, that could be a bottom in the crypto market. Yeah, so I think initially the panic, right? It's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats, or the opposite occurs when you see panic, people, and we saw this, by the way, in the COVID March 2020 collapse. Gold collapsed, Bitcoin collapsed, the stock. I mean, people were so panicked that everything kind of fell. So I think initially you would see that, and then very, very quickly that would be a buying opportunity for something like a Bitcoin. So I would just look at it as like, if you have the view like I do that long-term Bitcoin is amazing, then I do think you use it as a buying opportunity. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that I know we're kind of dealing with, is there going to be regulation? What type of regulation? Is it going to be bad regulation? I would like to make the point that I hear a lot more of the politicians getting involved with Bitcoin and buying it as an investment. And this is what's crazy, is they're involved with the dollar and what's going on in the spending in the government, and therefore they almost know deep down that the dollar's long-term in trouble, and they're diversifying with Bitcoin. So they're not gonna, they actually want Bitcoin to survive and thrive when they have investments in it. So I'm all for it. Like I think they'll be fine. I think the Bitcoin regulation or overall will be fine. Is this drop we're seeing right now the beginning, or is it going to come in a couple of weeks or a month from now? But I do think that ultimately within a month and a half to 2 months, we are fully in that next leg lower in crypto as a whole. And I do think, for me at least, I still have that 13,000 price target, which happens to be a what I call a measured move, taking the initial move from 69 down to 32-ish, and then the bounce high from 48 measured out to equal that first drop would take us to about 12.